What's up, everybody? It's your favorite hood healer. It's your favorite hood high priestess. It's your favorite motivational dominatrix. It's your favorite auntie, captain, goddess, king, LadySpeech in the place to be. And I want to welcome you back to this here channel. You could be anywhere in the world. As a matter of fact, you are somewhere in the world, and you're also sharing a moment or two or three or four or five with me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. If you're feeling this, if you're feeling me, if you like what I'm doing, if you like what you see, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and make sure you hit that notifications bell so you can keep up with these here shenanigans. So now, let's get into it. What's up, y'all? So your girl, your goddess, the king, LadySpeech is back again with yet another video about connecting with your ancestors. The previous video I recorded that is on this channel was all about connecting with your colonizer ancestors, so I will leave that tab in the corner for you to check out it at your leisure whenever you feel like it. Today's video is about connecting with your colonized ancestors or your formerly enslaved ancestors. So this was inspired yet again by the comment section on my TikTok. So number one, shameless plug, my TikTok is LadySpeech Sankofa. Feel free to follow that. I'm going to go ahead and read the comment that this video is inspired by. So this is a twofold comment. Number one, the first comment, the original comment, left by a black man, says, how can I connect to my ancestors? I'm never quite sure if I'm reaching them or not. Okay, and so then the second half, there was a few questions or responses to this that I'm not going to get into, but basically there was a few responses that were really coming from people who well-meaning, but they have a little bit more of a connection with their ancestors. Their story of colonization is different, I should say. They don't have a more connection to their ancestors. That was the wrong wording, but they are a lot more connected to the traditions of their ancestors. So they were giving a lot of really good and potent information. However, this is the main part of why we're doing this video. So then the same person replies to a lot of this good advice and says, yeah, not gonna work for me. I'm a direct product of slavery. I have no clue where I'm from in Africa or who they were. Okay, alrighty then. So this is that question is why we're doing the video today. So this is all about connecting with your colonized and formerly enslaved ancestors. Let's get all of the way into it. In the case of ancestor veneration, one of the most important things that you have to understand is that no matter who, what, where your ancestors fall on, what side, where they're at, where they come into play in regards to colonization, in regards to enslavement, no matter what, your ancestors, whether or not you connect with them, they are connected to and they are connecting with you. Okay, understanding that building a relationship with your ancestors is exactly that. It is a relationship that you build. As cosmic beings, you come into this world already connected to them. You're connected to them via spirit. You're connected to them because you are only here because they came before you. They existed before you. They had victories before you. They had defeats before you. They made love. They experienced sexual assault. They lived their entire full lives, some good, bad, and ugly, and all the things in between. You know, you exist because people existed before you. Literally, your face, your body, your spirit, everything about you is you individually, but also you are definitely a huge collection of the features, of the aspects of your ancestry, which is hundreds to thousands of years deep. Okay, so no matter what, no matter if you are connected to them, comfort yourself in knowing that they are connected to you, and they are always connected to you. They are always connected to you. So that right there, let that be your foundation. Know that they are connected to you. They hear you. They see you. They love you, and they are working for your highest good. Okay. So now the only thing that you have to concern yourself is developing the relationship on your side, opening up the pathways of communication on your side, trusting yourself yourself enough, developing your self-confidence in your spiritual connection to your spiritual team enough so that you can understand when you are hearing them, and you understand and you know that you are hearing them clearly, so that y'all's communication can be good and golden. Brings me to my next point, which is all about if you want to deepen your relationship with your ancestors, if you want to enslaved or colonized or otherwise, if you want to deepen your relationship, if you want to start a relationship, if you want to restart a relationship with your ancestors, then always seek to deepen your relationship with yourself. Hello, goodbye, let me say that again. If you want to have a close relationship with your ancestors, if you want to have a deeper relationship with your ancestors, if you are seeking to start a relationship with your ancestors, then a big aspect of that is always seeking to know yourself. Know your authentic, genuine self, the good, the bad, the ugly, and in between. Just like we are made up of our bodies are made up of our great-great-great-great-grandmother's eyes. You have your great-great-great-great-grandfather's feet. You have your auntie's nose. You have your great-uncle's hair texture. We also have personalities and aspects and parts of us that we draw from the ancestors, okay? The ancestors show up in us all the time. I have my ancestors' nose. I have the skin of my people. I have the lips of my ancestors. I have the thought process of some of my ancestors. The way that I move is the way that my ancestors move. I have the body shape of my ancestors. So starting right there, if you have nothing else, if you are disconnected, now this is really important when it comes to, this is for everybody, but also really, it's really super important for those of us who come from ancestors of the formerly enslaved and also of the formerly colonized. And notice that I'm not saying slaves, all right? So a lot of times, let me take a moment to have a little teaching moment, okay? Raise your hand if you were taught in school that slaves came from Africa. Raise your hand, it's okay. Most of us are taught that slaves came from Africa. I'm here to tell you that people were stolen, people were bought from Africa, and there was a system that was created, and then it was perfected over time to create slaves out of people, okay? So language is really, really important when we acknowledge our ancestors, especially when they're coming from the formerly enslaved aspect and from the colonized aspect, not the colonizer aspect, okay? So seeking to connect with yourself, because whether or not your history was written in books, whether or not you know the story of your people, the story of your people is written in your blood, your bones, and your veins. Science has proven that we carry the trauma, we carry the story of our people. Generational trauma is present in our blood, in our DNA. So if generational trauma is present in our DNA, you better believe that generational excellence is also stored in our DNA, and also other memories that have nothing to do with trauma and pain are also stored within our DNA as well, okay? So starting with yourself, starting with who you are, deepening that connection with yourself. As you get to know yourself a lot more, you will begin to recognize how you are a reflection of your ancestors. And then the more you get to know your ancestors, the more that you will see who you are reflected back in them, okay? The more you're seeking knowledge about your ancestors, the more you will be able to recognize yourself in these expressions of your ancestors as you are learning, okay? All right, so a deep connection with yourself, if you seek to, and that's across the board, but especially if you're seeking to understand your relationship with ancestors and seek to deepen your relationship with ancestors who were colonized, who were formerly enslaved, this is going to be a huge part of it. A really important aspect for a lot of us who come from, and actually most of us have the colonizer and the colonized in us. A lot of us have the colonizer and the colonized inside of us. Some of us have more of one than the other, okay? But all of us can benefit from this information right here. One of the things that's going to be beneficial for everybody to understand, that if you're coming from ancestry that was formerly enslaved, colonized, the indigenous people, black indigenous people, native indigenous people across the globe, if you're coming from that space, it's really important that you connect with the fact that your history, your herstory did not begin with the oppression of your people, with the enslavement of your people, with the colonization of your people. And for folks who have more of the colonizer blood inside of them, it's really important for you to understand that the colonized and the formerly enslaved ancestry inside of you did not begin with the presence and the introduction of the colonizer to them, okay? And so a lot of us are taught to, especially when it comes to indigenous people, when it comes to black people, when it comes to black world history, indigenous world history, we are only taught, if we're taught at all, we're only taught about the tragic, painful aspects of it, and we're taught about it in a way that tends to traumatize us as the, you know, the descendants of the formerly enslaved and formerly colonized, okay? It's super important to come at your history, your herstory from a different lens, okay? And it's super important to understand that the history of your people did not start with the oppression and the tragedy that you were often force-fed first when it comes to learning your history and your herstory, okay? Understanding that will help you to get through the moments that you need to learn about the history and the traumatic history, the painful history, the really messed up parts of what it takes to colonize a people. It takes a lot of pillaging, it takes a lot of murder, it takes a lot of rape, it takes a lot of really nasty things to colonize countries, lands, tribes, people. And learning those things about your history is actually really, really important to connecting with your ancestors. For me, my personal advice is understanding that that is not your complete history, when your complete herstory, and I say history and herstory very directly, people. Learning about your history and your herstory is going to help you connect in ways that are deeper, in my opinion, and it's going to help you to connect to the long lineage of your ancestors. The lineage that you come from is powerful, and it is long, and it is deep. Please remember that, yeah, your immediate lineage is what a lot of us think about. We only think about the first like couple, two or three generations, 3 or 4 generations that made us, but you are 500th in your lineage. You are 700th, you are 1,000, you are 1 million in your lineage. Please understand that we come from a vast and deep history that did not just start with the pain, the trauma, and the oppression, the enslavement, and the colonization of our people. Put some respect on your ancestors' name. Put some respect on your ancestors' history. Put some respect on their humanity, and put some respect on your own humanity by understanding that the ancestors, including yourself, are the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. Connect to and be willing to strive to connect to the excellence of them. Please do connect to the great stories. I don't like the phrase, don't speak ill of the dead. I actually I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase for this reason. Sometimes the dead lived as really nasty people, and in order to learn from their story, we got to know the whole story. If you want people, when you become an ancestor, to speak, you know, well of you, you better live your life in a well way. One of the things that our ancestors do is they teach us. They teach us from beyond the grave, and they also teach us because of the legacy they left behind. It's super important to acknowledge the crazy, the ugly, the mental health illnesses, the unsavory characteristics. It's really okay, and it's very important for us to connect to that aspect of our ancestry, because that's who you are. You are problematic, you are a genius, you are amazing, you are dope, you are wonderful, and you also have some things that you very much, very clearly, very directly need to work on. That spirit is telling you, work on it, look at it, fix it, Jesus, fix it, somebody. So put some respect on your ancestors' humanity, put some respect on your humanity, put some respect on all of the things, and understand that just as you are, you have really beautiful things that come from your ancestors, your artistic ability, your business sense, your sense of style, the way you can just decorate a room, your athleticism, all those things come from your ancestors, but also there are unsavory aspects of us that are rooted in our ancestors as well. Some of us have mental illness issues that are passed down from our ancestors that are actually directly related to someone else, and it got passed down through us, okay? So understanding ourselves, understanding our ancestors, giving them access to their humanity will allow us to give ourselves access to our own humanity, and hopefully what we can do is heal before it gets to some of the detrimental, crazy, not so cool spaces that some of our ancestors took it to, okay? There is a tattoo that is on my chest that you guys see from time to time. It is the symbol Sankofa. It is the Sankofa bird on each side on my shoulders, and in the middle, it is the Sankofa heart. It literally translates into go back and fetch it. You have to know what your history is. You have to know who you were, who your people were, in order to know where you're going, okay? And so this is about looking at all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's about understanding your history, so that you can move forward in a more enlightened space, so that you can learn from the mistakes of your ancestors, so that you can learn from the excellence, the lessons, the good things that they left behind. You know what I'm saying? So put some respect on your ancestors' name, and understanding that as you deepen your relationship with yourself, you're gonna understand where these direct, you know, things come from. It's really deep, and that really, there's a thing that we refer to as post-traumatic slavery syndrome, okay? Formerly, some people know it as post-traumatic slavery disorder. And it really literally translates to, if you know what post-traumatic stress is, it's literally after you experience something that's really, really traumatic, you have stress that comes up that is related to that after that existence, after that, you know, experience. So I deal with post-traumatic stress disorder because of all the things that I've survived in my life, a lot of the abuse that I went through and neglect that I went through as a child. But I also, because I'm Black, I deal with post-traumatic slavery disorder. And the thing is this, everybody does. If you are a Black person who has this in your history and in your DNA, you deal with post-traumatic slavery syndrome at some level. But also on the flip side, it works the other way around as well. It works the other way around. That's not just Black people who, but again, science backs up that we carry ancestral memories in our blood set up to 7 to 8 generations back, which is indigenous knowledge that a lot of our indigenous ancestors knew. Which is why ancestor veneration is actually a really important part of a lot of our spiritual practices. So because of this, there's a lot of things that I experience. There's a lot of symptoms that I go through, that I manifest, that I express, that are directly due to the fact that slavery was amended like that. People think that slavery was, you know, it ended 300 years ago, 400 years ago. No, darling. It was 150 years ago. Okay, and I always say it didn't end, it was amended, because the prison industrial complex is directly related and based off of slavery. So read your history, read your history. So slavery was amended. It like 150 years ago was literally 2 70-year-old women who lived back to back. That's like two to three generations ago. And it didn't just end. There was things like the Reconstruction. There was an era called Jim Crow that was not okay. That was oppressive in their own right, in their own ways, okay? So I say this to say it's really important to connect with the history. It's really important to connect with the good and the bad and the ugly things that came from that history. My people survived a lot of violence. And then there are people in me who actually I'm related to who gave a lot of that violence as well. So it's just really important to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly of things. And then this way you can take your ancestral healing, connection, and the breaking of generational curses that much deeper, okay? The more that you connect with the fullness of your history, of your herstory, the more that you understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, you're willing to look at the full story, the more you're going to be able to glean the amazing things from it and also learn from the crazy parts of it. Also, learning the exact story of the tragedy and the pain has made me it makes me understand my strength. Excuse me, it makes me understand, it makes me respect who my ancestors are. What they lived through was horrific. And I don't come at this I don't look at my enslaved or colonized ancestors through the lens of like weakness. What they survived, they shouldn't have. The way that their bodies, their minds were tested, I shouldn't be alive. I always say that Black people learned how to breathe underwater. And I say that because breathing underwater as who we are is an impossible situation. The enslavement of Black people was an impossible situation, and we survived it. And we survived it. Not all of us, of course, and we survived it. Black people learned how to breathe underwater. We've learned how to survive and adapt in situations that are not sustainable. Yet here we are. And does that mean we come out on top all the time? No, but here here we are. My very breath, the breath of every black person, the breath of every indigenous person is a revolutionary act, okay? So the more I understand the history, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, the more respect, the more love, the more strength that I can provide, and the more it makes me want to connect with my ancestors and every aspect of my ancestors that I can. Again, the trauma, the pain, the oppression isn't the only thing that I am rooted in, but understanding the fullness of my story helps me connect a lot deeper, a lot more concretely to them, okay? So it brings me to my next point, which is all about how do we connect with our ancestors. If you have access to knowledge, research. Utilize your library, utilize YouTube, utilize these spaces that you can take classes. You get at and learn from teachers who have skin in the game, who've learned a lot more about their history, and learn from them, okay? Seek out the books, seek out the knowledge, learn as much as you can about your history. If you have regions, if you know where you come from, you can begin there. If you, so I'm black. So one of the first places that I started off with is what I knew, which was the story we were stolen and taken from Africa. So then I focused in on learning about where in Africa, because it wasn't all of Africa we were taken from. So then I focused in on learning where we were concentrated from, and was very confident that when I learned about the African slave trade, when I learned about the Ma'afa, when I learned about the transatlantic slave trade, I was able to narrow places down in Africa that I could be from. And so I started learning about all of these aspects of Africa that I could be connected to. So a big part of connecting with your ancestors is starting with, again, yourself, and starting with what you know about where you come from. Another part of connecting with the formerly enslaved and the formerly colonized is honoring the traditions that you currently have access to, because so many times these traditions come from these ancestors, and they might have shifted and morphed and changed a little bit and adapted as different parts of us and different parts of your ancestor got a hold of that tradition, and depending on their geographic location and the resources that they had. But a lot of your modern day traditions are rooted in things that are old school. So honoring the traditions that you have access to now, honoring the traditions that you know of now. So many of those things are rooted in the past. For instance, I grew up, I'm an 80s baby, 90s kid, and a huge aspect of the culture that I grew up in regards to hip hop culture is about, you always, it was referenced in a lot of songs, you saw it on the street, you saw it with gang members, you saw it in a lot of spaces, but pouring a little out for the homie, pouring some 40 out for the homie. What I didn't understand until I got into the spiritual life is that is the act of libation. It is the act of libation, pouring out water in remembrance and speaking your ancestors' name, and pouring out that water in remembrance of them. It wasn't until I started connecting with more African-based practices, more Black indigenous-based practices, that I understood that that was libation. So I honor that. When I was young, I remember seeing that and becoming incredibly, anytime I saw somebody do that, I was very respectful, and I understood something holy was happening here. Even though I didn't understand how holy it was, even though I didn't understand where it came from. But I still honor that. So honoring that tradition, honoring our new traditions, honoring traditions that naturally come to us. Again, it is the ancestors speaking through us. Now, the practice of pouring out 40s for the homie, I'm pretty sure nobody told any of the young Black youth to do that except for the ancestors. Okay, no one was breaking down in gang culture how this connected us and how this was about honoring your ancestors, and yet that practice that is ancient, that is old, hundreds to thousands of years old, showed up again within us. So the importance of honoring modern day traditions, because so much of what we do is just a modern day twist and expression of what our ancestors did. So when we honor who we are, honor it. I think about the fact that breakdancing is connected to capoeira, which is a martial art that is music based. Yeah, it's rhythm based. That the enslaved Africans and native indigenous people, mixed Africans and Africans used in Brazil to help liberate themselves. But breakdancing is thrown to that. Also, there's parts in breakdancing that are related to different other cultural expressions in Africa. Interestingly enough, the places where Black people were stolen from and taken from when it came to, you know, colonization and enslavement. So honoring modern day expressions of who we are, honoring the way that the culture, that our ancestors speak through the culture is going to be very, very important. And it's an important aspect to our ancestor veneration and ancestor honoring. I want to take it back to the question, and part of the question was, how can I connect to my ancestors? I'm never quite sure if I'm reaching them or not, okay? So I want to get at that directly, the not quite sure part, and I've kind of covered it, but I want to go back and directly cover it. Again, when it's about developing a relationship. So think about the more you develop a relationship with a physical person, the more confident you become in y'all's communication. When you develop a relationship with your ancestors, it's a relationship, and y'all connect on the level that y'all connect, and you connect in the ways that you connect. So there are universal ways that a lot of the ancestors used to speak to us. A lot of them use our intuition, our instincts. They use electricity. Those are outside of you. A lot of times the ancestors will manipulate electricity to get their attention. But then there are personal ways that your ancestors connect with you. So I learned early on that my ancestors love to use music to talk to me. My ancestors use my music all of the time, and it comes out in very direct and indirect ways. I'll pray, or I'll ask questions, or I'll put something out in the universe, and the next song, someone will ride by and a snippet of the song that they're listening to comes to me, and it directly answers something that I asked for or something that I was worried about. So my ancestors love to use, and I use shuffle a lot when I'm listening to music, and like sometimes I'll check in, I'll be mindless about it, but I'll ask a question and check into my music if they tell me to check into the music, and a song or part of the lyric will provide the answer that I was looking for, or it'll send me on a thought stream, but that I need to be on to answer the question that I need to be answered. So I'm confident in that exchange because my ancestors and I have a relationship, and they've been very clear that they use that means to communicate with me, and they've affirmed that, and my confidence has grown with that. So it is about, again, developing your confidence in yourself spiritually, developing your relationship. You'll understand that, like, just like you have different friends and different family members you talk to differently, so you have your different aspects of your spiritual team talk to you differently. None of my other spiritual guides and parts of my spiritual team use music. None of them talk to me like that. I have a different frequency that I speak to and communicate with the other aspects of my spiritual team. So again, you know that you are connecting with your ancestors. How to connect more with your ancestors is developing more, or knowing that, being sure about your connection with your ancestors comes with time. It comes with consistency. It comes with direct working on it. It comes with developing your confidence, and you'll develop your confidence the more that you spend time in engaging in your spiritual relationship with your ancestors. When it comes to, in the case of connecting with your enslaved and formerly colonized ancestors, two big things you're gonna have to engage in: re-indigenizing and decolonizing. What do I mean by that? Those are two different things. They are definitely related and they go together, but also they are two different things. Re-indigenizing. Re-indigenizing is the act of reclaiming activities, cultural dress, the practices of your ancestors. So I am mostly Black. And a great tool that we have access to is Ancestry DNA, Ancestry test. So for African and Black people, I do know that there is a Black-owned company that that is a lot more detailed and can pinpoint where your tribes are, a lot more where you're from tribally in Africa. There's general DNA tests like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, y'all know the regular Ancestry tests that you can utilize to figure out this information. And so I was gifted a test a couple years ago, and I was able to find out my DNA results. And interestingly enough, when I found out those results, there was a lot of, because I've been doing a lot for years, I've been working with the connection of the ancestors. It was I'll say say this, I have a lot of Nigerian in my blood, and Nigerian people are always around me. I'm always attracted to Nigerian people. It's so interesting how the ancestors work through you. So it's, when I got my DNA test, it actually really confirmed a lot of taste, things that I love, things about the culture that I was already attracted to. It just was really interesting to see how the presence of my ancestry already, and even when it came to like the English and the European blood that's in me, it was really uncanny how a lot of the things that I already have an affinity to showed up like in that DNA test. I was like, oh, of course, I love this, I love this, I love this. This is directly related to this culture. It's interesting how your ancestors, again, are already working through you. So when you honor yourself, you end up honoring your ancestors. So actively re-indigenizing, if you know where you're coming, if you have access to the DNA tests, if you have access to these things, reclaiming aspects, learning parts of that history, reclaiming them in the levels that feel comfortable with you as you are, and in the levels that your ancestors are, you know, telling you to. Also, be aware of this. Be aware of just colorism, be aware of racism, be aware of cultural appropriation, be aware of all of that. Be mindful and be prayerful as you are reclaiming these things. Just be aware of that. Spirit urged me to say that. But, you know, in the reclaiming of these things. So that's part of the re-indigenization. Part of the decolonization is looking at what the practice of decolonization is, looking at how colonialism have separated us from our indigeneity, how it has separated us from parts of our humanity, and attacking that process and looking to dismantle that inside of us. Okay, that's a different process than reclaiming your indigenousness. That's a different process than re-indigenizing. Okay, completely different process. Okay, so honoring our ancestors is also, it's not just about, and connecting with your ancestors is definitely a spiritual thing. It is definitely about altar work and prayer and ritual and ceremony, but also honoring, connecting with your ancestors is an everyday practice. Your ancestors are consistently 24 hours a day connecting with you. They connect with you in their sleep. They're connected with you some way, somehow, some way. Sometimes it's an active connection where they're talking to you and they're exchanging and they're leading and they're guiding you. And sometimes it's more of a passive connection, just with the way that they show up and your instincts, wants, desires, tastes, the way that you dress, what you cook, what you like to eat, the different things that you prefer, your preferences, the good traits that you have, the bad, the not so great traits that you have, you know. So they're always connecting with you, and I really think it's important to understand that the process of connecting with your ancestors, if you don't have access to, you know, your altars, if you don't have access to these things, the process of connecting with your ancestors is so much deeper, and it encompasses so much more. Connecting with your ancestors through nature, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes your ancestors show up through nature. Some of my ancestors love to show me their form. They show me themselves in their essence through the forms of my animal brothers and sisters. So there's certain animal brothers and sisters, and when they appear in my life, I know it is that energy. But there's also sometimes, I know the dead love to use butterflies a lot. So there's some of you who connect with certain ancestors through butterflies. Birds are big things, and it's certain birds. You know, I know hawks are very ancestral for me. I have a connection with other birds, but anytime there is a hawk, I have very dramatic, and I have very prophetic, and I have very intense interactions, and I have very ancestral interactions with hawks, you know. So hawks tend to carry messages from my ancestors for me, as well as owls as well, and that's something that a lot of people are connected to, you know, as well. And lastly, the last tip that I have for you today, it's reiterating what I've said before, which is really honor yourself. Honor and get to know yourself, because you are a ancestor in training. So if you want to connect to your ancestors, again, you want to honor your ancestors, honor yourself. Honor yourself. Attend to your mental health. Honor yourself, you know, heal. Honor your desires, your true desires. Be authentic, be genuine. Walk in the true essence of who you are. Honor your desires. Honor who you, I ain't saying go kill nobody though. Don't do that. But honor, you know, honor your desires. Honor your talents. You know, so many of us our talents come from our ancestors. I used to think that in regards to creativity, I was kind of like the black sheep in my family. I really didn't see any examples around me. But then, like, my maternal grandmother, who I don't really have a great relationship with, I found out that she's a writer, that she is and I should have known how dramatic she is, how into theater she is. But in the end, like, it was this aha moment. And then, like, the ancestors revealed to me how many other grandmothers had this talent that I, you know, came from. So really honoring yourself when, you know, I honor my talent, when I honor my gifts. I honor not only how they manifest and express through me, I honor where they come from, whether or not I know who they come from. I may not know the names of a lot of my ancestors, but the more that I seek to know them, the more that they reveal to me, the more that I walk towards them, the more that I open up to that relationship, the more it gets revealed, you know? And I want to be clear that in my journey, when I began honoring my ancestors and working with this practice, I came from a space where, number one, you guys know that I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I probably should have did this at the beginning of the video, but whatever. I come from a space where I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So the way of life was not something that was taught to me, or in the beginning, it wasn't given to me. I come from a space where this occult world, the spiritual world, was all considered demonic. And so I wasn't, you know, encouraged to pursue this world. If anything, I was discouraged from pursuing this world. So I don't come from a space where this was the norm for me, but this is the norm for me now. So even if you come from a space where you weren't raised in this way, know that your ancestors can connect with you. You can connect with them, and they want to connect with you. It really began with a prayer. And that's also a big part of connecting with my ancestors, is I talk to them, you know, I talk to them. So praying is going to be a huge aspect of them. When I pray, as soon as I left that Jehovah's Witness world, it really became clear that prayer was not just about asking for things, that prayer was a communication tool, and it wasn't just with God. It wasn't just with God, you know. As I left that Jehovah's Witness space, the more that I prayed, the more other things would, you know, answer me. So I have a relationship with my ancestors. I talk to them directly. There are some prayers that are just for them. There are just prayers that are about us learning each other. I don't just ask for help. I also ask for knowledge. I ask for their stories to be revealed to me. I ask for their names. I ask for different things, and I've gotten pretty much everything that I've asked for. Some answers have come 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. Some answers have come 2 weeks down the line. Some answers have come in the form of books, in dreams. Some answers have come because family just dropped random information in my lap, you know. Some answers have come in the form of, you know, regurgitated memories, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I speak to them. So developing my relationship with my ancestors, a key component of that is talking to them. I do a lot of talking with them at my ancestor altar, of course. I do keep an ancestor altar. I do believe that I come from practices that is a central, integral aspect to our practice. But I also just talk to my ancestors whenever, you know what I'm saying? I have formal places and spaces that I speak to them in. I have a potty mouth. I love to cuss. And that's not something that my ancestors demonize. Of course, there are some ancestors who didn't cuss as much as I do. But they don't demonize this is who I am. In front of the altars, in front of sacred holy spaces, I tend to speak a lot more formally and not cuss as much. But in my regular everyday life, I speak regularly to my deities, and they don't mind because they accept me as a regular person. We understand that I contain multitudes, and I understand just like you act right in certain places and you can act a little bit rowdy other places, and that's the same way I interact with my ancestors. So I'm a full person with them, and they're allowed to be a full person with me. So that is it for today's video. That is most of the points that I wanted to cover. So thank you. If you made it to the end of this video, gold star for you. Now, you know the drill. If you like what I'm doing, if you like what you see, if you're feeling this, if you're feeling me, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that notifications bell so you can keep up with these here shenanigans. These here shenanigans. And all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Mwah! Peace.